Welcome to Seeing the Forest for the Trees, using a logic model to create clarity. Good afternoon. My name is Hannah Jacobson Blumenfeld, and I'm the Community Engagement Manager for Creative Forces. I'm delighted to facilitate this conversation this afternoon and welcome you all to an hour of learning together. The purpose of the webinar today is to introduce the concept of logic models and familiarize everyone with the Creative Forces Community Engagement Grantee Logic Model. Creative Forces NEA Military Healing Arts Network is an initiative of the National Endowment for the Arts in partnership with the U.S. Departments of Defense and Veterans Affairs that seeks to improve the health, well-being, and quality of life for military and veteran populations exposed to trauma, as well as their families and caregivers. Creative Forces is managed in partnership with Americans for the Arts, the Henry M. Jackson Foundation for the Advancement of Military Medicine, and Mid-America Arts Alliance. The community engagement component of the Creative Forces initiative has been developed through Community Connections projects, which took place between 2018 and 2020. These projects occurred across the country in locations near existing Creative Forces clinical sites. These projects were varied and diverse and all helped us to identify outcomes that are also informing our current Creative Forces Community Engagement Grant Program. The projects have been inspiring and impactful for so many reasons and have also provided really important guidance on how to understand and work toward best practices in the community setting for military-connected populations. Today, we'll be joined by the fantastic Community Connections project teams from ArtSpark in Austin, Texas, and So Say We All from San Diego, California. These projects recently completed logic model workshops with us and are here to share lessons learned about developing logic models and using them. And we're excited to talk to them a little bit later. But first, it is my pleasure to share the screen with Dr. Kelly Feltault. Hi, Kelly. Dr. Kelly Feltault is the Metrics and Evaluation Manager for the Community Engagement side of Creative Forces. She has a BFA in Painting and Printmaking and a PhD in International Development and has over 25 years of experience as a program evaluator. Kelly and I recently completed monitoring, evaluation, and learning, or what we call MEL consultations, with 12 of the Community Connections projects from Creative Forces to support capacity building in MEL. So we've spent a lot of time sharing the screen together. And during the consultations, each organization developed a theory of change, a logic model, performance indicators, and metrics to measure outcomes. So in this first part of the webinar, we are going to learn more about what a logic model is, what the main parts are, and why they're important by exploring the Creative Forces Community Engagement Grantee Logic Model. So if you have questions throughout this webinar, please do put them in the Q&A. We will have time at the end for questions, and we will be monitoring that Q&A. So now I am going to go ahead and pass it over to Kelly to teach us more about logic models.
Thanks, Hannah. This is an introduction to logic models and their main elements, and a brief introduction to the Creative Forces Community Engagement Grantee Logic Model. Today, we'll explore what a logic model is and review the key components. We'll get a better understanding of why programs need these models, and we'll talk about the starting point for logic models. Finally, we'll take a look at the interactive community engagement grantee logic model on the Creative Forces National Resource Center. Let's start with a definition. Logic models are a detailed visual representation of how your program will operate to address an identified challenge or need in the community, and how the program will create specific outcomes for participants, communities, and organizations. The main purpose of a logic model is to test the feasibility your program can be implemented and will lead to these outcomes by testing the relationships and connections between the outcomes and the resources and activities needed to produce those outcomes. Logic models let you answer two key questions. First, if we do this, will it work? Will we create the outcomes we intend, and will it address the need or the challenge facing the community? And second, can we do this? Do we have the right skills, partnerships, expertise, and other resources needed? Let's take a look at the key components of a logic model. The core parts of a logic model are the outcomes and the rationale, shown here in pink. The rationale is the challenge or need your program will address. This is the reason your program exists, to solve a problem or meet a need. Sometimes the rationale is called the theory of change. Outcomes can be changes in behavior, attitudes, perceptions, awareness, values, beliefs, knowledge, skill, social relations and social conditions, policies, practices, regulations, many different types of changes depending on the need. All of these changes, these outcomes, can be targeted at individuals, groups, organizations, or institutions. Outcomes are sequenced as short, mid, and long term because change can take a while to happen, and it often occurs in a progression or steps. So this lets you track how change happens over time in your program. Now, how outcomes are sequenced depends on the individual program, its length, the frequency of activities, how often people participate, and other factors. So a long-term outcome for one program might be a short-term outcome for another. The next key component in the logic model are the activities, shown here in green. Activities are the actions your program takes to create the outcomes. Activities can be training for staff, the arts engagement workshops or classes delivered, partnerships that you create, and all of those administrative activities that keep the lights on: grant writing, marketing, board development, social media. The activities should directly lead to the outcomes. If they don't, a good question to ask is, why am I doing this if it doesn't support my outcomes? After you complete an activity, you have an output, shown here in purple. Often outputs are confused with outcomes, so let's be clear about the difference. I'm going to give you an example. Let's say you have a math tutoring program for 7th graders, and your program has tutored 80 students this semester, and students report they are very satisfied with your program. Both of these things, the number of students participating and their satisfaction with the program, are outputs. They are benchmarks for progress on how you're implementing your program. At the end of the semester, 78% of the students who received tutoring improved their math grades. That is your outcome. Students increased their knowledge and skills around math. So outputs are benchmarks for program implementation, such as the number of people trained, participant satisfaction rates, number of social media hits. And the outcomes are the change that happens in the individuals, organizations, or institutions after you reach the output. Finally, we have the inputs, and these are the resources you need to implement your program. Anything from funding to computers, staff and time, materials, and space. There are many reasons for a logic model, but the most important one is that they increase the likelihood your program will succeed and that you can show your success to stakeholders. They are the first step in designing a program and ensuring you are meeting a community need and your program has a purpose. They act as a program map, communicating your purpose externally and internally so that staff and stakeholders are on the same page and have a shared understanding of the program's goal, results, and how to get there. They improve program design, implementation, and evaluation, and expand your ability to monitor program success and easily report on it, especially through the outputs. They demonstrate to funders how your program should work. They provide a sense of good stewardship for funding, and they quickly tell funders about your program. Creating a logic model starts by defining the challenge or need that your program is going to address. So determining and stating your rationale or your theory of change. Then determine what the changes are that should happen if you are successful in addressing the problem and meeting the need. These are your outcomes. As I mentioned earlier, outcomes can be changes in skills, knowledge, attitude, behavior. It all depends on the problem you're trying to solve or the need you're trying to meet. Together, the rationale and outcomes show the cause and effect relationships that are the foundation of every program and every logic model. These two things are the focal point of the logic model. Everything else in the logic model flows from these two things. The rationale for Creative Forces community engagement projects was developed through our community connections projects, which identified the following needs. Programs that are military culturally competent, that improve health and well-being of military-connected participants. Programs that are designed to meet specific needs of local and now virtual military-connected communities, so one size does not fit all. Partnerships that recognize the value and impact of arts engagement and support sustained programming. So educating partners about the value of community arts engagement. To address these needs, Creative Forces builds the capacity of community arts organizations in military cultural competency, program monitoring, evaluation, and learning, and creating partnerships, so that community arts programs create outcomes for military-connected participants. So we have two sets of outcomes. The first set of outcomes are organizational for grantees and partners. Become a networked organization through partnerships and networks that support the design, implementation, and evaluation of culturally sensitive programs. Strengthen capacity, which includes gaining skills in military cultural competency, identifying community needs, monitoring and evaluation, and building partnerships. And increase the value of the arts among non-arts partners through partnerships. Creative Forces believes the grantee organizational outcomes will lead to any of these four long-term outcomes for military-connected participants. Increased creative expression that leads to a better understanding of themselves and others. Increased social connections and sense of belonging. Increased resilience. An improved sense of independence and adapting to civilian life that includes a sense of purpose, increased sense of self-worth, and adjusting or transitioning to civilian life. Let's take a look at the interactive Creative Forces logic model on the National Resource Center. If we look at the top of the page, it walks you through the rationale and the outcomes. Below that, the interactive logic model lets you view either the emerging or advanced tier for the grants program. You can get more information on each of the logic model elements by clicking and opening a window that gives you details. Let's look at the emerging tier, starting with the outcomes. If you click the outcomes, you can see how the participant and grantee outcomes are sequenced as short, mid, and long term, and what they mean. Grantees will determine which of these outcomes will be part of their program based on their rationale and the need they are trying to meet. To achieve these outcomes, grantees conduct any of these activities depending on their outcomes. The activities are listed under different headings related to program implementation, technical assistance provided under the grant, and the many ways an organization could provide arts engagement using a variety of arts disciplines. Depending on the outcomes and activities, a program will produce any of these outputs. These are organized based on the activities, identifying needs, building capacity, delivering the arts engagement activities, and participating in technical assistance. The inputs list the resources needed to deliver the activities and produce the outcomes. Now, I have worked backwards through our logic model because that is the process for creating one. Visually, they work left to right, starting with inputs through outcomes. The interactive logic model lets you move in any direction and switch between the grant tiers. I'm going to throw it back to Hannah now.
Great. Thank you so much, Kelly. Really appreciate you sharing all of this as always. And now taking all that you've just shared with us about logic models, I want to transition to our discussion with ArtSpark and So Say We All to talk about the process we all went through together in the MEL consultations through Creative Forces as community connections projects, and learn more from you all about how that process went and what you're doing now with these logic models. So I'm going to introduce our speakers now. Hi, everyone. So I'm delighted to welcome everyone to the screen, starting with ArtSpark Texas. ArtSpark Texas is based in Austin, Texas, and challenges perceptions of how people contribute by creating an arts-inspired, inclusive community of individuals with diverse abilities. And from ArtSpark, today we have joining us Celia Hughes, the Executive Director. And Celia Hughes has over 40 years of experience working in the arts, mainly focused in theater, film, and music as a teacher, producer, artist, and administrator. She's worked alongside people with disabilities for over 30 years. In her role as Executive Artistic Director of ArtSpark Texas, she develops and oversees inclusive arts programs in partnership with public schools, community and veteran centers, cultural arts facilities, and disability service organizations across Texas. As a daughter of two World War II veterans, she believes in the power of the arts to bring healing and peace to our returning warriors. So thank you and welcome, Celia. We also have April Sullivan, Director of Programs, and April Sullivan started at ArtSpark Texas as its very first employee in 1997. She continued her arts administration career at the Austin Museum of Art, Laguna Gloria, and returned to ArtSpark in 2002, where she has been ever since. She's the Artworks Director at ArtSpark Texas and has been the leader of the veteran program since it began in 2009. She is also a visual artist. And finally, we have Denise Knebel, the Program Manager, Teaching Artist, and Chief Master Sergeant, retired U.S. Air Force. Denise joined the U.S. Air Force in 1981 and retired at the end of 2004. She's worked for the Southwest School of Art and Craft in their mobile art program and also offered painting and drawing classes at the Arts and Crafts Centers on both Lackland and Randolph Air Force bases. She began working with ArtSpark Texas in 2009, helping them improve and increase services and programming offered to U.S. military veterans and their family members ever since. So thank you all three for being here. And now I'm delighted to welcome So Say We All. So Say We All is a San Diego-based 501c3 storytelling arts nonprofit whose mission is to help people tell their stories and tell them better. So excited to hear you all tell your stories today. And we have Justin Hudnall, Executive Director. Justin received his BFA in playwriting from New York University's Tisch School of the Arts. He currently serves as the co-founder and executive director of So Say We All. In a prior career, he served with the United Nations in South Sudan as an emergency response officer. He is a recipient of the San Diego Foundation's Creative Catalyst Fellowship and Rising Arts Leader Award, SD City Beat's Best Person Award of 2016, and is an alumnus of the Vermont Studio Center. He produces and hosts the PRX public radio series Incoming, and I can vouch for the fact that Justin is indeed a best person. So that is certainly true. Jennifer Corley, Program Director. Jennifer D. Corley has a background in playwriting, other creative writing, and dramaturgy, and is a Program Director of So Say We All. She's won writing awards from Slamdance Film Festival and Lonely Planet, and was also an accepted participant in Tin House Magazine's Writers' Workshop for Short Fiction. In addition to her role as Program Director, she serves as editor and music supervisor for the So Say We All radio series Incoming and None of the Above, and the host and producer of Listen with the Lights Off. And finally, we have Taylor Funderburk, Board Chair of So Say We All, and Research and Program Associate at the Nonprofit Institute at the University of San Diego. Taylor first started working with So Say We All in graduate school at the University of San Diego, where she completed her master's in nonprofit management and leadership. She joined the So Say We All board in December of 2020 and serves as the board chair. Her expertise is in survey development, evaluation, and data analysis. And we will certainly get into a little bit more of that expertise later. Thank you all for being here. So now I'm going to open this up to a little more conversation. During the consultations, we asked participants to give us feedback throughout the process, including the challenges as well as successes. So I just want to start this out by reminding everyone that this was and is and continues to be a learning process. So I'm going to pass it back over to Kelly to kick us off in this conversation.
Thanks, Hannah. So we asked everyone what their concerns were before and during the consultations. ArtSpark Texas, Celia, April, and Denise, Can you tell us about some of the concerns you had about creating a logic model as you went through the process, and what were the benefits you found to the process?
Sure, I can start. You know, I've heard about logic models for years, and I'd actually seen some, but I really had no concept as to what it was going to involve. And so I was very concerned that we were going to embark on a process that was going to just provide me with a piece of paper at the end that I could say, yeah, we did this, but it wouldn't have a lot of value for me. And so that was a big concern that I had. And I don't know if you want to know the result of that, or if my concern was realized. But my concern was not realized at all. From the first day, from the questioning and the guidance that we were getting from Kelly, and the deep, rich conversations that April and Denise and I were having around our programming, was remarkable. And I came to realize that the process was where the learning was going to take place, and that the gift was going to be the piece of paper at the end that documented everything that we had talked about over a period of months.
Thank you. Denise, April, anything you guys want to add?
Yeah, I can add it. As the kind of coordinator of this program, my job is to make it all happen. Like Celia will come up with the ideas and write the grants and all of that, and then I make it happen. So doing is more my thing. And thinking about having to sit in this weekly meeting and all of these ideas about outcomes, I was nervous about what would come of it. I didn't know if I'd be any good at it when I hear evaluation and outcomes, and my eyes just glaze over. So I was a little nervous about the whole process, but once we started doing it, it just became, like Celia said, a conversation. And it was great to have Denise in the room as a veteran, and Celia there with her ideas, and me there, all working together with Kelly and Hannah on what our process was. And it worked out. Like Celia said, you ended up with like a map of where you were going and how you get there. And then it became just doable steps, which I understood and was able to implement.
Thank you. Denise?
Good afternoon. I had a lot of experience with plans and programming while I was in the military, so I had certain expectations of how that would all work out with this new way of looking at things. And I have to say it was a really enjoyable process. My main concern prior was, is there going to be time to update and reflect? And were the meetings that we were going to have the only time that we were going to be able to do inputs and everything? And very quickly found out that would not be the case at all, that we could continue to reflect, and actually we were encouraged to reflect after the meeting, go back and read what we had talked about, and they would send inputs, and then we'd look at the inputs, and then you'd reflect some more, and could make a lot of more connections in your ease time. And I really appreciated that. I was able to go back and continue. They want you to brainstorm a lot. They want nothing is off the table kind of thing. So there was just a lot of opportunity to go back and reflect and be able to add in. And whenever you added in, they were very accommodating, and then adding what you put into the different plans and processes and charts and everything. And yeah, so there was absolutely no foundation for my worry about everything would be solid and in stone the minute we said it.
Thank you, ladies. Hannah?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you all so much. And you know, to that point, Denise, things certainly do evolve. So say we all. Any thoughts on your concerns and any of the evolution there?
I can go. I know that one of my concerns was kind of like what April said, in terms of thinking that, you know, with us being a creative arts organization, it was just kind of a worry or a fear that, oh no, a logic model, this is not something that we or I can even handle, that this is going to be a chart and a thing that I can't understand, and I'm not even really interested in it. I just want to, do the creative stuff or whatever. But yeah, it ended up being incredibly helpful because, I thought, and I'm pretty sure that probably Justin thought too. I can't speak for Taylor because she definitely has more of a background in this sort of thing. But, I think we thought that we probably had a pretty clear vision of what our incoming program was. But then once we started on the MEL program, we couldn't answer a lot of these questions that came up. And so we had to really think about narrowing down our focus, and I think the MEL process really helped us with that, and helped us get a clearer vision of what our program really was, and ultimately how we're going to do a better job of serving our veteran population, and yeah, focusing better on it.
So interesting that you say that about the sort of push-pull of the creative part with the logic model, and that it actually ended up freeing up some space to really think about that creative part, which I think is a really key point. Justin or Taylor, do you want to add anything to this one?
Yeah, I'll go next because Taylor has to go last because she's smarter than me about this stuff, and I don't want her to cut me to take away all the talking points I have. Yeah, like Jennifer was saying, so obviously, concerns were time, right? We're a very small nonprofit. We only have 2 staff, and everybody else is a volunteer. And I have a bachelor's of fine arts, and I have tangential information about this, but it was still like the idea of a logic model was just one more phrase to play nonprofit bingo with, like phrases that get bandied about too much. But what was incredible about the actual process is, initially thinking about this, I was thinking that all of our programmatic information would feed into the logic model, and it would be a one-way direction, right? We just put this stuff in, we go left to right, and then we have this thing, and then, okay, now we can replicate and we can fine-tune and all of that. But what I actually found in practice was it was much more like 2 mirrored screens, whereas you're creating your logic model, you're actually seeing and identifying moments to ask yourself about your programming. Well, why do we do this, right? Is it because we've always done it, et cetera? And so we were actually able to fine tune a lot of our programming, reduce some of our offerings and streamline them down so that we were offering our constituents exactly what they needed in the most efficient, best way possible. And we've also found that beyond programming, it's informed how we pursue sponsorships, how we conduct fundraising, even how we are looking to hire future staff, because we have such a cleaner idea of what we do and therefore what we need. So yay, logic models.
I love it. Taylor, do you want to add any? I mean, this was a question about concerns. I love that it's become a question about how all those concerns were allayed during the process. But anything you want to add to this one before we move on to some other conversation?
Sure. I'll keep my responses quick because I think my awesome partners and Texas really hit the nail on the head, right? I came in with a background in evaluation, so doing a logic model itself was not daunting to me. It's something I had a lot of background in, but as many times as you do it, it's different every single time, right? So I think kind of going into it, it wasn't so much concern, just intrigue of how are we going to approach with different programs that we already had built out. Because oftentimes logic models are done first and programs are built after in a perfect world. That's not always how it happens. So how do you backtrack from what you already exist? And I think as we dove into it, I mean, just as Justin was saying, it helped us really ask those questions of, well, what's really ancillary and what's really important that we need to keep going forward that is answered or that we do want to capture in our outputs and outcomes as we get to the further evaluation side that the logic model feeds in, right? So it's kind of thinking about what are the next steps, and it's not done in a day. So those concerns of, are we going to try to get through this too quickly? But we had plenty of time, so many meetings that really helped us work through it one step at a time, that it took the dauntingness really down to a very tangible level.
That's great. And I think a really good transition to our next question, which is going to be with Kelly.
Yeah, thanks, Hannah. Well, first, I'm glad that we allayed everybody's concerns and fears. And as I mentioned to you all at the beginning of our mail consultations, this isn't rocket scientists. I don't work for NASA, so it's doable. So I want to ask Celia and Justin what surprised them about the logic model process and what they learned from the process through the lens of the executive director. So let's start with Celia.
Okay, thanks, Kelly. I kind of want to follow up a little bit on what Taylor said, in that I was concerned heading in that we were going to be looking at a program that we had been running for several years, and that it was going to be about looking back at what we had done and sort of evaluating what we had done. And I didn't think that that's what I wanted to do. I really wanted to have more of a forward lens. And so when the Mel opportunity came along, I thought, I need to really jump on this and take advantage of this. I had no idea how it was going to work, and I was really pleased. I came to look forward to our early Monday morning calls, where for an hour, we just set aside time for an hour to just talk and, talk substantively about what we were thinking, what we were wanting, what we were observing, and then have the magic of Kelly put it all in a chart and give it back to us that we could reflect on. Was really delightful, and it surprised me, because I thought, well, again, I thought this is going to all be about what we've done, but it really wasn't. It was about, what are your hopes and dreams for this, and what has happened up to now that justifies and validates, and what do you want to do differently? And I really appreciated that, and was surprised and pleased with the way we were shepherded through the process.
Thanks, Celia. Justin?
Yeah, I mean, I know that logic is in the title of logic model, but I was really impressed with how much we were able to kind of really focus in on the actual logic of why we do what we do and how we do it. We were able to kind of take a step back once we had laid everything out initially, and instead of it, we were able to kind of evolve our way of thinking in our programmatic implementation from being like, we do this and then we do this and then we do this, to kind of much more, much more like good storytelling. We do this, and because of that we do this, and because of that we do this, and so they all flow into each other a lot more organically, and so somebody can look at it at a glance and just see what we were thinking and where we're taking the entire cohort throughout our process and why we're doing that. And that's also very important for me because, again, when you run a small nonprofit, and I'm very guilty of this as an executive director, that I can kind of be a squirrel with things where I'm just like, oh, shining object, and that's cool, and let's do that and tack it on. And sometimes that's fine. And sometimes you really need to kind of reinvest in what you do really well and not try to fork off in too many branches. We were also really able to interrogate some things that seem like kind of no-brainers that we should do, but when we really ground down into the logic of it, it didn't make a lot of sense. And I'll just give a quick example, right? Like this program that we're workshopping with Creative Forces helps veterans and active duty service members tell true stories in their own words, right? So a lot of the feedback we've been getting is like, oh, you should get on Miramar, you should get on Pendleton. We're in San Diego, we're rich in Marines. You should get on base. And while it's true, I think that our programming should be featured in the military community on base, the last thing we ever want to do is have somebody be voluntold to tell stories about potentially the worst day in their life, right? That's not a good program. That's not what we do. That has some pitfalls. So we were able to really thread the needle and put it down where we're going into the military community and what the best practices are, to do no harm and have a great impact, hopefully.
And that's a great point, Justin, that both of your logic models, you and Celia's, included the outcomes for the participants, but you also had organizational outcomes and plans in your logic models as well.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah. Great, thank you.
And, each of these organizations on that note included team members in your MEL consultations who have unique expertise. And as we're talking about some of those best practices and impact, I'd like to bring on ArtSpark, as they included Denise, who is both a veteran and a teaching artist. So I'd like to ask all of you a question and then ask Denise a question from her perspective. So first, to all of you, how did having Denise as part of the team impact your logic model design and your understanding of participant needs?
Well, because Denise is part of our team, but also a participant, she was able to give us that view from that side of it. And as a veteran, which Celia and I are not, she was able to give that viewpoint, which was, I think, very valuable.
She really made it real, made the process real, because I would have my ideas, intuitions, whatever, but I came to really rely on hearing from Denise as to, does this feel real? And is this something that the veteran community will relate to? Are we on the right track? And it was really valuable. I would not have undertaken this process without Denise or a veteran on the process through from beginning to end, because, as we say, nothing about us without us, and especially in the veteran community, having a veteran experience, sensibility, there was absolutely critical to the conversation.
Yeah, that's great. And I think having that voice in the room really does make a huge difference. And so, Denise, I want to ask you, well, there are a lot of questions that we may save one or two for the Q&A section, but for now, would love to know, how did being a part of this process change the way you thought about developing a program?
Okay. Well, as I had said before, I was very much into planning and programming when I was in the military, so I had my preconceived notions about how it was going to go. This was a lot more open and looked at things a bit differently than some folks in the military might be used to looking at programming and everything, a lot more open. And I think one of the things definitely was the help translating the different issues when we were putting them into do like the concept mapping, outcome mapping, making our during the meeting comments, but then the ones you get at 2 o'clock in the morning and send it to you kind of comments, and having it come back in a different form and then it had lines drawn, and you guys did a really good job of kind of letting us know where you thought it should go. And we did a really good job, I think, of telling you, yeah, you're right, but no, that's not right. Because there were some times when it wasn't the way that you had put it, the way that you thought or understood it. And so I have to say that it began to make more sense to me when I saw those connections, not just thinking about it or hearing about it, but when you guys came in and Kelly, you made those connections with the arrows and everything, and we did the mapping. That was really, really helpful to me to be able to wrap my head around everything that was going on up here, and as you said, in the head and the heart, and actually put it together in a plan that actually made sense and had a direction. So
yeah, sometimes it's easier to respond to something that makes a lot of sense. And yeah, thanks for sharing that. And now we'll hear from So Say We All and their unique expertise.
Yeah, thanks, Hannah. So Say We All included Taylor in their MEL consultations, and Taylor is their board president with a background in evaluation. So I want to ask Justin, why did So Say We All ask an evaluator to be a board member, and what has been the benefit of that?
Sure. Well, Taylor and So Say We All had a meet cute initially before she joined the board. She, as Hannah mentioned in her bio, created a case for support for us as part of her grad student training. And then once that period ended, it was a no-brainer that we should try to further exploit her generosity of talent by getting her on our board in a leadership position. So in my prior job in the United Nations, I got to work a lot with the monitoring and evaluation officers, and they weren't universally beloved, right? Because they're kind of the internal affairs of program people. The UN, much like the military, is a kind of if you don't spend it, you lose it culture, which creates a lot of redundancy and waste and inefficiencies. And monitoring and eval people come in and they can point at it and they're like, you may want to do this because it sounds good to donors and it makes a good, sound bite, but here's the data and there's got to be a better way, right? Like we're not doing stuff. And as the guy on the ground, I love that because it validated what we were seeing and doing. And so having Taylor step into this role with So Say We All, it really allows us a very focused and she's an insider with an outsider perspective of how to be able to look at our programming and really kindly and generously guide us through those important moments of self-interrogation to really see, like, is this the best use of our time and is this the best direction of our growth? And so having that there has been really invaluable, and she's also been incredible at motivating the board to make informed decisions.
Great, thank you. So Taylor, how have you contributed to So Say We All's mission as an evaluator, and how has the MEL consultation process had an impact on your own board service?
I think first and foremost, the best thing about monitoring and evaluation is the data you get from it, right? Whether it is the numbers or the major themes. And I think inherently having this tool is only going to help us, right? Our mission is help people tell their stories better. This is a tool that's going to help us tell our story better. We know we're making an impact, but how can we showcase that, for marketing stuff, for grants, what that looks like. So I think bringing that perspective in has been really beneficial, but as it's embedded in different conversations among the board, and as we think about additional programming or sponsorships and things like that. And personally, I think it's been a great additional growth aspect, right? As a board, you want different perspectives and expertise to sit with you. So, right, my fellow board members have so many different areas of expertise that bringing this evaluation lens to the conversation has really impacted what I feel like I can bring to the board. It's influenced how I want to be a board chair and lead some of those conversations. So overall, I think it's really been really kind of powerful as we continue to grow and expand as an organization, that we have these tools to help us tell our stories. And it's not just for the one program that the logic model was so far, but how we're going to continue using the concept and the framework of a logic model in different aspects of our programming.
So are you using the logic model with the board?
Not, we haven't done it with the board necessarily, but when we've had conversations about who are we stakeholders with, right? Who are our stakeholders in our sponsorships, which are a piece of the conversation we had during that theory of change. Those ideas and those conversations, those questions that the three of us in our meetings, right, with you and Hannah, we talked about a lot. We're bringing those questions to the board as we think about potential sponsorships or expanding different programming. It's helping guide, right? Not thinking about all the ancillary pieces, but truly what is working and what's not, and what do we not really need to add that we think maybe we should. We're really trying to focus on what's needed, what's the foundation, and moving forward with more direction.
So it sounds like you've shared the logic model with the board and it's helping focus them on their role. Yeah,
so definitely it's been, I'd say, right, as a board, your goal is to think about big picture, right? The staff knows the day-to-day. They're doing amazing on the day-to-day. We don't need to be in the day-to-day stuff, right? But how can we work as a team and as a partnership to stay mission focused and keep the board engaged and active, and with that big picture in mind? Really helps us kind of fulfill our mission.
And I think that's an excellent use of a logic model, actually. It's a wonderful use of it. Hannah.
Awesome. So I just want to remind everyone quickly to please throw your questions in the chat. We will save a few minutes at the end for any questions, but we're going to keep rocking over here and chatting until there are some questions. So please feel free to throw those in. And in the meantime, I'm really thrilled to talk to Jennifer and Taylor and Denise and April as program managers and leaders of these organizations, so that we can get into some of the details of how this really looks operationally and on the ground. So how have you all been using your logic model since completing the MEL consultations? The $1 million question. Are these helpful to you?
Yeah, it's been very helpful. We've used it in terms of, well, looking it over, and now I have the outcomes, the short term, the long term, the midterm. I can look at those and see when to start evaluating our participants and how to evaluate them after they take a class. We have some workshops coming up, so I'll be able to implement that immediately. And also just in terms of my communication with other veteran organizations, I feel like it's given me more confidence to be able to talk to them as partners, because we did that part where we talked about the partners and what their motivations were. And I can use that information and the information on kind of our needs, assessment of our needs and our goals, and be able to talk to them a little bit better about how we are able to serve veterans, and that it makes sense, and what we're doing by having an art program, a songwriting class, and how that works its way back to helping a veteran reintegrate or something, you know. So that's how I've been using it.
That's great. And so important to be able to use it as a storytelling mechanism, right? To be able to go to something and have it written down so you don't have to reinvent the wheel every time when you're thinking about that. I think that's a great use. And Jennifer, any thoughts from your end?
Yeah, sure. It's kind of as what Taylor was saying. We've been, Justin and I especially have been talking about how our veteran and current service member program incoming, we haven't even implemented it yet for this coming year, but we've talked about how our logic model plan can be implemented with other programs even. Then we bring it up a lot more than we thought we would, actually. You know, when we talk about other projects, other programs that we're going to be working on, and it'll come up. Oh, we can use the logic model. Actually, we could go through that same process for this next thing, just so that, because it was so useful in narrowing down that focus, like I had said earlier. So yeah, we talk about it and about applying it so that we can, so that we can help out with, yeah, like I said, basically with narrowing down our focus and how we need to, how we need to better serve each program. And also, like Taylor said, in terms of approaching the board, also in terms of getting sponsorships, that sort of thing. It's just, it turns out it's a good process for everything.
You know, that's great, because it's, in a lot of ways, it's sort of the opposite of what a lot of you brought up about your concerns about it, that it would take away resources, or it would take away time that's so precious to you, especially as small organizations. And in fact, it's helping you save resources and time because of that prioritizing element of it. It sounds like part of what you're saying. Is that a good way of thinking about it?
Yeah, it was right, an investment of time. As we put in time in those weekly meetings, but it's going to save us time in the long run. It's going to keep us from wasting time.
Love that. That is critical. And on the note of time, I'm going to quickly pass it to Taylor or Denise, if you want to add anything, any last thoughts to this before we jump into the Q&A. Looks like we have a couple questions rolling through.
Oh, wonderful. No, I just going to say, adding on to what Jennifer said, you're not spinning your wheels, not recreating. You're able to focus a little bit better in that, and in the long run does save you time. are you on the right track? We had a lot of things planned, and we were able to then analyze and see, okay, we're on the right track. Yeah, so a lot of the things that we had going on already were kind of validated by this process, and now we can go on and continue to develop them and look into the future. You know, we've got this as our background. We can now look at our different programming. I'm not really part of the other parts of Art Spark, but I know that they'll be able to now use this in their other parts of programming too, which I think is quite exciting.
That's great. That's great. And Taylor, I'll toss it to you for any last thoughts on this one.
Yeah, I think Jennifer hit it right on the nail of the head for us. It's really just, we realized, right, that there's these core principles that are integral in every part of our programming and publishing and those aspects of it, that every logic model will have certain pieces that are going to be the same, and knowing what those pieces are, well, just is going to allow us to build out that thinking process between all the different programming. So it's really just kind of embedded itself in all the various aspects of SOCIAL, which is great.
That is great. Well, thank you all. And I will thank you all more formally later, but really appreciate you sharing all of these thoughts and so much of your experience with everyone and with us. So I think this first question is probably for Kelly. Can you please talk more about how the process to move from outcomes to key indicators and to the related metrics?
Right. So there are several processes that you can use to do this. As an evaluator, the one that I prefer is have everybody look at the outcomes once you have your logic model set, right? And you've filled in all the boxes and you've done all the work that these folks have described, right? The conversations, the reflection, are we on the right track? You want to ask, what does this outcome look like, sound like, or feel like when you see it happen? These programs have been going on for a while. So these folks were very aware of what these outcomes looked like. They'd experienced them, they'd seen them in action. Putting words to them meant describing it. And so once they did those descriptions, we were able to then take those and start to use those as the metrics. So you generally want to have metrics for your outputs and your outcomes. A lot of logic models will include metrics for your inputs and your activities as well. But for the key ones are to have metrics for your outputs and your outcomes. And so you go through the process of developing what those are going to look like, how often you're going to measure them. You want to have SMART indicators. So SMART is an acronym, right? It's specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. So we went through that process as well. Everybody set up their metrics. We worked only on what's called the formative outcomes, and the long-term summative outcomes, we did not work on. That is something that an external evaluator should collect, whereas your formative outcomes, the internal staff and program staff should be collecting those as part of monitoring your program and its performance. So as part of performance measurement, we developed those outcome and output metrics and ways to collect those. And it's rather unique to every program, so it's hard to say a blanket process for how you do that, but those are basically the steps, yeah.
Great. Thanks, Kelly. And there was a follow-up question about whether everyone created a theory of change. So I don't want to put anyone on the spot here, but maybe a little bit of conversation about the distinction between the theory of change and the logic model, and anything. This question mentioned something graphically about the theory of change. So how that theory of change becomes a more visual element in the logic model process.
I'll start here. I really enjoyed the theory of change process that we went through. I didn't really have a concept of what that was going to be. And actually, when we got through it, I thought, oh, well, now we've done our logic model. And then Kelly was like, no, now the work really begins. But the theory of change was was really, that's where we really kind of peeled the onion and looked at all of the layers of what we had been doing over the last 11 years, and put like Kelly said, put words to what it was, put words to what our outcomes were, what our feelings were, what we were pretty sure we were seeing as outcomes and outputs. But now we were able to talk about it again amongst the three of us and the five of us actually with Kelly and Hannah, and create a beautiful visual picture through words of what it was that our hopes and dreams for the program and how we were going to get there. So it was, we couldn't have done the logic model. It wouldn't have been the same. We wouldn't have ended up where we were with the logic model if we hadn't spent several months really just talking about the program and what it is that we're trying to accomplish through our program. It was really, really valuable.
A beautiful response. Thank you, Celia. And we have about 1 more minute if anyone would like to add anything to that on the theory of change.
I'll jump in first. So say we all, I mean, that I think really captures how it worked for us as well. But I think, right, the theory of change and logic model really goes hand in hand. They're tools that should be used really collaboratively. And oftentimes I think of theory of change, right, is this really solid narrative format of, you can say in your head, right? Sometimes you think about something in your head and you're like, oh, I can do this so beautifully. And you start writing it down. And you're like, oh, what are the words that I really need to use to help kind of get somebody else to understand it or really think about the start to finish and the outcomes and the results and the problem statements. So for us, I think it really went hand in hand and really helped kind of clarify certain aspects of it as they fed into each other.
Fantastic. Well, thank you both so much for those answers. And thank you all so much for joining us today, with a special thank you to our fantastic presenters, Kelly, Celia, April, Denise, Justin, Jennifer, and Taylor. This is a really robust topic. Obviously, we could go on, and we're looking forward to continuing to learn and to growing with you. On that note, we hope that all of you tuning in today or later with the recording will join us for future Creative Forces webinars. You can learn more and subscribe to our YouTube channel and newsletter at creativeforcesnrc.arts.gov to make sure that you hear about future webinars and opportunities to connect. Thank you again, and wishing you all a great afternoon.
For more information, refer to the National Resource Center at creativeforcesnrc.arts.gov.